So up until now, in our regular classes, we've been covering Essence of Refined Gold, and we've finished it, but the section in Essence of Refined Gold relating to calm abiding and special insight wasn't very extensive, and I'd like to go through that a little bit more. As we know, calm abiding and special insight are fundamental for achieving omniscience. And also, they're very important in our day-to-day life in a secular way, separate from religion. So in a twofold way, they're very important. So we're going to look a little bit more at these two. And Tsongkhapa, in his great treatise for the stages of the path, has written extensively on these two topics. And that's laid out in the section for Mahayana practitioners to achieve full enlightenment. So we're going to base our discussion of this on Tsongkhapa's great treatise for the stages of the path and what he has written there. In the great treatises, they do talk about a meditation practice. And the terms that are used in the greater treatises, right, the commentarial treatises, are such like concentration or meditative stabilization out of the three trainings. And likewise, analytical meditation, placement meditation, calm abiding, special insight. So there are all these different technical terms for different types of meditations, let's say. But I want to emphasize that they're not entirely different from one another. The differences are small and essentially they're all utilized for achieving full enlightenment. And not only within Buddhism, non-Buddhist practitioners too cultivate calm abiding, for example. And then if we go away from religion entirely, these days people cultivate a meditative stabilization that is similar to calm abiding in order to relieve their day-to-day stresses and mental anguish and so forth. In Tsongkhapa's great treatise for the stages of the path, as I said, the section on calm abiding is extensive. We don't have time to go into it in 2 sessions. And not only that, it's actually extremely complicated. So to avoid that problem, what I'm going to do is synthesize all that information and present it in a brief manner. Tsongkhapa starts with discussing the advantages for meditating on calm abiding. And then likewise discusses the disadvantages for not doing so. So just as Tsongkhapa did, I will likewise start by discussing these. So in the Western world, we talk of psychology as a science of mind to achieve mental happiness. So in Buddhism, and likewise, I guess, psychology, you divide everything into the category of either sentient or non-sentient. And of course, we're not talking about the non-sentient inanimate world. We're just talking about the sentient world. In Buddhism, that's every being included within the 6 migrations. As for psychology, maybe it's even more restricted than that. But in Buddhism, it's all sentient beings. However, in psychology, mostly pertaining to human beings, of course, it identifies a relationship of suffering and its causes and happiness and their causes as connected to external phenomena, right? Not being entirely on a mental level. So therefore, psychology and perhaps science as well focuses primarily on external or physical phenomena in order to achieve mental well-being, let's say. But in Buddhism, we identify that the average person who's unaware of the causes of happiness and suffering does not know how to collect or achieve the causes for happiness and avoid the causes of suffering. because they have not identified them. Ask yourself, in the period of a single day, all your experiences of happiness and mental upset, are they arising primarily due to external physical conditions, or is it your own problem on a mental level, right? Through your attitude and perspectives. Are they creating your problems, or is it something external? Can external things give you happiness? If it were so that you could derive all your happiness from external phenomena or physical things, then now would probably be the best time in history for us to all have complete and perfect mental well-being, because we've made so much progress, so much advancements, right? In terms of developing our material world. But we see around us that despite all this, there is still so much human suffering on a mental level. So therefore, the cause of this mental suffering is rooted in us not having tamed our minds, and our minds being constantly distracted towards the physical and the external. Right? This is what's giving us our problems day to day. Right? It all roots back to us not having tamed our inner mind. Therefore, it's an issue of us not having tamed our mind through meditation and practice. And not having tamed our mind through meditation and practice, we fall under the influence of our untamed mind. And therefore, we are under the influence of attachment, anger, ignorance. And that leads to a lot of disturbances around us in our society that we create for each other, and also within our household, right? Instead of being happy because we've created the causes through it, through meditation and practice, we have the opposite, we suffer. And this proliferates to, on a greater level, to war, for example. The wars that go on in our world are rooted in human beings whose minds are not tame. So therefore, think of the root cause of all this mental anguish and suffering and problems in our life as coming down to essentially not meditating and practicing, not taming our minds, and therefore being under the influence of attachment, anger, and ignorance. Without a meditation practice, we end up hurting ourselves and we end up hurting others. It's a terrible thing. So, is there a way to eradicate our afflictions? Yes, according to Buddhism, there is a way to do so. And that is through a Buddhist practice of meditation. I really doubt that it would be possible to do so through scientific methods that currently exist. They don't seem to be able to get at the cause and deal with that. And likewise, I doubt the effectiveness of these current spiritual trends in the world, right? So therefore, the best method that I see is the practice method within Buddhist philosophy. So we see that our own attachment, anger, and beginningless ignorance is causing our problems in our day-to-day life. Can you think of another method to get rid of them and therefore stop your day-to-day struggles? If not, then it's clear that the answer to getting rid of them is the Buddhist meditation practice. And we understand that we are all the same in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, and therefore, if we want to abandon the causes that bring our suffering and accomplish the causes that bring our happiness, we need to frequently engage in practice. So those are the disadvantages of not cultivating calm abiding or a meditation practice, as I've been saying. So now we move on to look at the advantages of doing so. And Tsongkhapa talks extensively about these. And we can say that it comes down to temporary advantages or ones that can be derived right now, and ultimate advantages from cultivating calm abiding. So the advantages or the temporary advantages of calm abiding are as follows. So for you guys who are people who have a job, a family, you have worldly priorities that you are concerned with and have to deal with day to day, right? For example, you might have a spouse, and sometimes it just happens that because you're unable to be patient with each other at that time, you get upset with each other, and all sorts of things throughout your day can lead to being upset. So it's important to understand that through cultivating a practice of calm abiding, or more technically, we should say a similitude of calm abiding, because we as beginner practitioners can't actually generate actual calm abiding. We can then pacify this sense of suffering or this upset mind that happens throughout the day regularly due to different causes and conditions. So sometimes we just want to uplift our state of mind, right? Bring some joy or happiness to ourselves. And that's entirely possible through getting focused, withdrawing inwards, and meditating single-pointedly on a certain object, right? Our previous state of being upset disappears and is pacified through doing that and is replaced with joy and happiness. So these are the temporary, or some of the temporary benefits of cultivating calm abiding. So what's important for normal people is education, for example. And you can also bring a practice of calm abiding into your learning experience. So, for example, you could stay single-pointedly focused on whatever knowledge you're trying to acquire. And within the discussion of calm abiding, we start to get technical terms like the factor of abiding and the factor of clarity. So if you can develop a factor of abiding within your concentration, it helps you to not forget the knowledge you're trying to acquire, right? And if you can increase your factor of clarity of the object, it helps you to understand it better. So I said, you can focus on an object of knowledge or whatever it is. But even, I mean, this was just an example with your learning process and whatever education you're undertaking, but also within a retreat or an approach retreat, as we call them in Buddhism, it's extremely important to develop single pointedness. Because if you don't, then your mind just wanders. And if you have a propensity to let your mind just wander to anything, it's naturally going to go towards non-virtuous objects, which leads you in turn towards non-virtuous actions, and we end up committing non-virtue and accumulating bad karma. So those are the temporary advantages or purposes of cultivating calm abiding. So let's now transition to the ultimate advantages of doing so. So the ultimate purpose of cultivating calm abiding for us is to achieve the state of omniscience, right? The victorious state of Buddhahood. In order to do that, we need to traverse the 10 grounds and 5 paths. And in order to traverse the 10 grounds and 5 paths, we need the union of calm abiding and special insight, which of course requires that we first cultivate calm abiding. Not even for the omniscient state of Buddhahood, but also for the state of an arhat a hero or solitary realizer, arhat, right? Without calm abiding, they cannot accomplish their final mode of enlightenment. For example, in order to become a solitary realizer arhat, one too needs to directly realize selflessness. And in order to cultivate a direct realization of selflessness that can act as an antidote to the afflictions, it needs to be based in calm abiding. Essentially, we can say you develop a calm abiding that generates a mind realizing selflessness. Uh, Let me clarify with Geshe exactly this process because I wasn't too sure of it when he was saying it. Okay, so you develop calm abiding and you likewise cultivate a calm abiding that is a realization of emptiness. And likewise, you develop a special insight that is a realization of emptiness. You unify the two. You eventually destroy all afflictions and achieve the state of an arhat. So, whichever of the three enlightenments you wish to attain within Buddhism, that of a hero, solitary realizer, or a Buddha, you require fundamentally to have calm abiding. So calm abiding is common to Buddhists and non-Buddhists, right? It's not only Buddhists that cultivate it. Non-Buddhists cultivate calm abiding and likewise actual concentrations and develop high states of realization. But the difference between the two are the motivation behind cultivating those meditations. A Buddhist calm abiding would be fundamentally qualified by refuge, right? So although we in non-Buddhists cultivate single-pointed meditation on an object, a Buddhist calm abiding is qualified by refuge fundamentally, and then if you want to make it a Mahayana calm abiding, it is of course qualified by bodhicitta. That concludes the advantages of meditating on calm abiding. So now let's look at what calm abiding actually is. What is its nature? Well, it's a consciousness, but there are many different kinds of consciousness. Therefore, there are, for example, minds and mental factors. Well, calm abiding is a mental factor. And there is a presentation of 51 mental factors. So which one is it? Well, out of the 51 mental factors, it is a meditative stabilization that focuses single-pointedly on an object. So how do we know that that which is called calm abiding should be a single-pointed concentration? Well, we can look to the sutras where the Buddha actually stated that. So there's a source in the Jewel Cloud Sutra, Mahayana Sutra, that says calm abiding is a single-pointed mind. Special insight is analysis. Right, so it's clear cut just from that sutra. Then we can look to the commentaries, the Indian commentaries. For example, Kamalashila authored 3 stages of meditation. Within his middle stages of meditation, he defines calm abiding as a pacification or calming of outward distraction and a continuous placement on an inner object. And then goes on to say that it's qualified by physical and mental pliancy. So 2 technical terms that we're going to encounter. In order to try to accomplish calm abiding, we need to put in a lot of effort, right? And that means we really need to strive and go through difficulty in order to do so. It's not possible to accomplish calm abiding without putting in a serious amount of effort. So we've looked at the advantages of calm abiding. Now we've looked at its nature. What is it? And we've said calm abiding is single pointedness without distraction. Well, what is the object upon which it is single pointedly focused without distraction? Fundamentally, the object of your calm abiding practice can be anything. So it is said that you can accomplish calm abiding based on literally anything that exists, right? You can focus on anything. There's a story in Pabonka's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand that there was an Indian practitioner who was trying with all sorts of objects to achieve calm abiding, and in the end, Geshe said whether it was like a elephant head or a goat's head or something like that, he was able to achieve calm abiding. So the takeaway from this is that the object, the focal object, is not what's important. It's the development of single-pointedness on that, which is important. The focal objects that Tsongkhapa talks about in his great treatise on the stages of the path um, are explained extensively, but since we don't have time, we're not going to go into all of that. So within our Buddhist treatises on calm abiding, when it talks about the focal object, now if we look at Tsongkhapa's treatises in particular, he says, okay, it's true, you can accomplish calm abiding independence upon anything, but because our purpose in accomplishing it is special, and we need to accumulate a lot of merit and roots of virtue along the way to achieve our final goal and eradicate non-virtue, it's better if you take particular focal objects in order to accomplish calm abiding. So they would be the image of Shakyamuni Buddha or your Yidam, etc. So fundamentally, in order to practice or try to accomplish calm abiding, um, there are many other factors that we need to understand and become familiar with. For example, Maitreya, in his separation of the middle from the extremes, he talks about the five faults, the eight antidotes, and a whole other array of necessary information that is required in order to achieve calm abiding. But we will look at those in our next session. Less, gonda. Okay, I was just clarifying something because I hadn't heard it before, but okay. So we'll look at those points tomorrow. Now we'll continue with talking about when we practice calm abiding. We know that we need to adopt the 7-point Vairochana posture. I've explained that to you before in other sessions, so you should be familiar with that. So I won't go into the 7-point Vairochana posture again, but know that you should try to adopt it if you can. And now we know that for our purposes, we should take up the image of Buddha Shakyamuni as our focal point for meditation. Now, there are different stipulations about how big the image should be and exactly where we should imagine it. So, first of all, it said that we shouldn't imagine the image of Buddha Shakyamuni to be too big because then we sort of lose the image, right? Yeah. So instead of this gigantic image, it's supposed to be about the size of your thumb. And there's 2 points of view as to where exactly you should visualize it. One is that you should visualize it at the level of your eyebrows, and the other is that you should visualize it at the level of your navel. And that's what I was clarifying with Geshe because that I hadn't heard before. So what would be the difference between visualizing Buddha Shakyamuni at the level of your eyebrows and visualizing Buddha Shakyamuni at the level of your navel, right? Navel being your belly button. Apparently, like Geshe said, I don't personally know from experience what the difference would be, but it is said that if you visualize Buddha Shakyamuni at the level of your navel, that it enhances the factor of abiding, right? This technical term that came up before. And if you visualize Shakyamuni Buddha at the level of your eyebrows, it enhances the factor of clarity. Right, so if you visualize this gigantic image of Buddha Shakyamuni, obviously your mind is going to start zooming in on different features of that gigantic picture. So for example, you might start focusing on the ear of Shakyamuni Buddha all of a sudden, or you might start focusing on his chest or his legs, and you start zooming in. And that's not ideal. You don't want that to happen. You want to maintain the picture of the whole, and therefore it's easier to do so if you imagine Buddha Shakyamuni about the size of your thumb. Likewise, you shouldn't visualize Shakyamuni Buddha as being flat like a tanka image, so like 2D. Instead, he should be 3D. Essentially, he should be real. You should also not visualize that he is made of copper or gold and so forth, like a statue, but rather as a real person, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for example, like a real living monk. Likewise, when you meditate on this image, you shouldn't analyze it because when you're cultivating calm abiding, you're cultivating placement meditation, not analytical meditation. So don't analyze it. Likewise, when visualizing this image, it shouldn't actually be too clear, right? Not super, super clear, and likewise not unclear or murky, but somewhere in between, because it is said that if the image is far too clear, there are also faults that arise for beginners. So this object of Buddha Shakyamuni or whichever yidam or deity you're choosing to take as your focal point should appear real, right? It shouldn't appear as like a picture. It should look like a reflection, right? A reflection of a person looks like a real person. And likewise, you should mentally adjust it, let's say, to look beautiful and appealing. So that's what it should look like. And so you're cultivating it and you should stay on the object. You shouldn't start analyzing, oh, is this part of it red? Is that part of it blue? Is this part orange? And so forth. Keep analysis out of it because it is an obstacle to achieving single-pointed focus. Likewise, don't change your focal object. For example, some people, if they're imagining a deity that's perhaps white and wearing white clothes or something, after a while they feel like they don't want to imagine this white image anymore. They want it to change to something yellow or change it to something red. Or if it's too small, you feel like, oh, I feel like I want to enhance the size of it a bit. Don't do this. The focal object should not be changed. If you change the focal object, it is said you can't actually accomplish calm abiding. So stick to one thing. And in doing so, according to the authentic treatises, a person can achieve calm abiding within 6 months, or if not 6 months, within a year, if they follow the instructions perfectly. So some people might start to doubt themselves after some time meditating on a particular image, thinking, I've chosen the wrong one. This isn't a great image to achieve calm abiding with. But since calm abiding is fundamentally a mind which remains single-pointedly undistracted to external objects, remaining on one single image, the point is that it doesn't really matter what image you've chosen. The point is that you focus on it and remain on it. So when practicing calm abiding, the two main obstacles to a factor of firmness and a factor of clarity are, of course, laxity and excitement. So, for example, you're trying to make your mind remain on an object and then it wanders off somewhere else. So, the mind's propensity to wander to something else is due to excitement. Now, excitement belongs to the class of attachment. But it's not necessarily the case that your mind moving to something else is due to attachment. To give some examples of why suddenly shifting or being distracted towards another object is not necessarily due to attachment, we can say that fundamentally a mind shifting to another object could be virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral. For example, you could be focusing on Manjushri and then your mind could swap objects to Avalokiteshvara, and that's not out of attachment. Or you could be meditating on Vajrayogini and then you could move to the object of Tara, right? That's likewise not due to attachment. You could be thinking of Buddha Shakyamuni and then you could suddenly start thinking about, generosity, ethics, or bodhicitta, again, that is not due to attachment. So we've discussed the focal object of your calm abiding practice. And the two main obstacles to accomplishing calm abiding are excitement and lethargy. So excitement is the obstacle that stops you remaining on the object, and laxity is the obstacle to its clarity. So there are many different degrees of subtlety to laxity and excitement. We'll go into those tomorrow in more depth. But now we're going to take your chosen object of calm abiding and we're going to meditate on that for a few minutes. So whether it be Buddha Shakyamuni or whatever you like, we're going to try our best. Because as we know, the Buddha's practice of meditation is one of the best features of Buddhism. And it shouldn't be something that we just talk about as a feature of Buddhism, but we don't actually do or put into practice ourselves. So we do need to actually meditate if we want to reduce our afflictions and increase our qualities. So choose whichever focal object you wish, and we're going to remain on that for about 5 minutes as best you can. Okay, and don't think about it too much, right? Whichever object you choose is fine for our purposes. Let's try and stick with the image of a deity, for example, Shakyamuni Buddha, your particular yidam. It could be Vajrayogini, Manjushri, Tara, whichever is fine. Do not analyze it. Just try and keep the image naturally sort of clear in your mind as you can. Don't think too much about it. Okay, now meditate on it. So it's quite difficult to keep our minds on the focal object, isn't it? But over time, with more practice, meditating again and again, you will be able to do so. So does your mind wander off to the shops or to the market? Where is it going? Yeah, it's going away. Yeah, everybody's nodding. Okay, so that's okay if your mind has wandered, because that's what we would expect as beginners. And there are more methods to be cultivated to prevent that and to be aware of it wandering, because sometimes it wanders for such a long time that we're not even aware that it's gone off. So that's called introspection, and we'll talk about introspection as a method to be aware of when the mind has wandered. So today we've looked at the importance of calm abiding. We've looked at the necessity of calm abiding in order to tame our mind. And just as another point, um, as to calm abiding itself, we talk of minds belonging to the level of the desire realm, belonging to the level of the form or the formless realm. So, which one does calm abiding belong to when you achieve it for the very first time? Well, it doesn't belong to the level of the desire realm. It is technically a preparation for the actual first concentration. So apparently, according to pretty much all of the commentarial treatises, there cannot be calm abiding that is by nature a mind of the desire realm. Although there is said to be a mind that is a path of meditation, right? So a very advanced realization that is a desire realm mind. But exactly how one would posit that and the details of that, I'm not too sure. And the reason for these discussions is because, as we know, the desire realm mind or our desire realm minds are so incredibly coarse, and most of them are, minds of attachment towards the pleasurable objects of samsara. So therefore, such a coarse mind cannot turn into the entity of calm abiding. So therefore, we say when calm abiding is first achieved, it is an actual what is it? A preparation for, sorry, a preparation for the actual first concentration. Okay. This is talking from a sutric perspective. From a tantric perspective, things are different. So we need to separate that discussion and not apply this logic to tantra. So keeping it on the level of sutra, um, that's essentially the logic to it, right? The desire realm minds are just simply too coarse. Some people might then give rise to doubts. Like, for example, you have the 9 mental abidings, which lead up to the development of calm abiding, right? And these will come later, but there are importantly 9 mental abidings that must be cultivated first. And then the doubt is, well, they are all minds of the desire realm. So then how could the 9th mental abiding, which is called equipoise, um, turn into something which is not a desire realm mind, right? How could it become calm abiding? If, yeah, because the 9th mental abiding itself is said to be a desire realm mind. It is the most subtle type of desire realm mind. Um, but it, uh, but it existing as a desire realm mind does not mean that calm abiding will first exist as a desire realm mind for us. Sorry, that was complicated. All right, so to bring it back to something more simple, when you meditate on calm abiding, keep it short. As beginners, if you meditate for a long time, you'll start to develop aversion to meditation. You won't want to do it. So keep your sessions very, very short, 5 to 10 minutes. And if you do so, you'll want to come back to it again and again. It is said, for example, you could do 16 sessions throughout the day, right? Very short, in short bursts. Moreover, the best time for meditating on calm abiding is early morning when your mind is fresh and relaxed, right? If you meditate in the evening, especially after dinner, what's going to happen is that everything that happened throughout your day is going to come up in your mind. And you're going to get distracted far more easily, right? You're going to be affected by everything that happened to you that day. So keep that in mind that the best time for it is in the morning when you're fresh. So try and set a motivation that I'm going to get up maybe a little bit earlier than usual, and I'm going to set aside just 5 minutes or maybe 10 at most to practice calm abiding. So start creating that mental habit so you get used to it and it naturally becomes something you want to do. And it's very beneficial just for your day to day as well, 100%. Whatever you do throughout the day, interactions with other people, for example, are less likely to upset you so quickly. And if they do upset you, your mind will be pacified quicker than usual. And likewise, it can just generally help to calm your mind and keep you from getting distracted as much as you might normally do. Do you have any questions?
If anybody has any questions, you can try to unmute yourself. Otherwise, does it work? Otherwise, you can raise your hand under the react button. Like raise hand.
Geshe said there's a monk and maybe he has a question.
There's a monk?
Or someone who looks like a monk, I guess. Kushro desu yun.
Kusho Mindu. Ribbon. Rabbit. No, Michael is elephant. Lang. Correct. Lang. It's not what Lang. Lang Chen. Lang Chen. Michael, you have been arrowed. Arrowed by your elephant.
So it seems like there's no questions and we'll end the
Yes,
class.
yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Lang Chen is
Yes.
going to ask.
And yeah, no, I'd just like to ask Geshe about what is desire realm mind. Yeah, that one I don't quite understand. What is that? Sorry.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, sure. What does Geshe mean when he says a desire realm mind? All of our minds are desire realm minds, right? Just talking as us here, speaking for us, not for other beings, but it means that they exist on the level of the desire realm, right? Our minds don't exist on the level of the form realm. They're not a part of, they're not on that level. We can keep it as simple as that. So what that means that our minds 99% of the time are focused on the pleasurable objects within the desire realm, right? Sounds, smells, tastes, forms. They're attached to them. They're focused on them. They're coarse minds. So that's essentially what a desire realm mind is. I guess the next question would be, could we be a person in the desire realm and have a form realm mind, right? That's normally what people want to understand. Do you want me to ask that, for example? Yes. I guess that 그래서 아니 dökamgi kanzarwa. 이난 dökam기 kanzagi gula 아니 samden tambogi shebada 아니 sukamgi sedugi semdende yongsogrbes. I guess there's under the impression that I would actually know about this because I've debated a lot, but I don't. So that's why I put it to Geshe. So yes, as desire realm people, as desire realm beings, we can generate in our mind minds that are of other levels. So minds of the form realm. For example, a person within the desire realm can give rise to the actual concentrations. So the concentrations are pertaining to the form realm and the formless realm, right? So to the eight actual concentrations. For example, once you get into the more complicated commentarial literature, it just spills out in immense detail all the sorts of minds on the spiritual path, which pertain to these higher levels that a desire realm being can generate. So really what it boils down to, and the reason we need to know this, is in order to abandon afflictions that are on the level of the desire realm, we need to rely on minds that belong to higher levels in order to counteract these afflictions. So, for example, a special insight realizing emptiness that is on a higher level than the desire realm is required in order to counteract these afflictions of the desire realm. So don't get confused thinking that like a desire realm person generating a form realm mind, well, doesn't that mean that you then have the mind of a god because it's the gods who live in the form realm? No, it's not. That's not what we're saying. Don't get the idea that you're giving rise to the mind of a god in the form realm. That's not what it means at all. It's just saying that calm abiding can be achieved by anybody in the desire realm. We can achieve calm abiding, and calm abiding, when it's first achieved, is not on the level of the desire realm. It's on the level of the form realm when it's first achieved.